Good evening. The world woke up on day 20 of this conflict to a reality that few analysts had predicted even a month ago. Iran, once the feared bully of the Middle East, is now fighting on every front simultaneously, from the Caspian Sea in the north to the Strait of Hormuz in the south, from its own burning streets to shattered alliances with neighbors it once intimidated into silence. This is no longer just a military campaign. This is the unraveling of a regional order that has held, however unstably, for decades. And the question is no longer whether Iran can win. The question is whether it can survive. Day 20 opened not with a familiar strike in western Iran or the Tehran corridor, but with something genuinely unprecedented: Israeli Air Force jets operating over the Caspian Sea, hitting Iranian naval vessels near the port of Anzali in northern Iran. This was not a symbolic gesture. According to intelligence assessments, one of the vessels in that port was carrying drones and advanced electronic warfare equipment from Russia to Iran. 5 large warships were reportedly destroyed, with a 6th smaller vessel damaged. But the real significance of this strike goes far beyond the hardware sitting at the bottom of the Caspian. For years, Iran operated under a strategic assumption: the north is safe. The Caspian coastline, tucked deep inside the country, close to Russian territory, far from Israeli reach, that was the rear. The warehouse, the supply corridor, the breathing room. That assumption is now dead. By operating in northern Iran, Israel sent a message that cannot be misread. There is no safe depth anymore. Not in the west, not in Tehran, not in the south, and now not in the north either. Every Iranian military planner who believed geography offered protection now has to reconsider every single calculation they've made. The Russian connection here is also significant and demands attention. Moscow has reportedly been expanding its cooperation with Tehran in recent months, upgrading drone navigation systems, improving communications resilience, and hardening electronic warfare components against disruption. This wasn't just weapons transfer. This was a capability upgrade designed specifically to help Iran survive and adapt in the middle of a war it was losing. Israel intercepted that upgrade before it reached the battlefield. That's not just a tactical win. That's strategic intelligence work of the highest order. Let's step back and absorb the scale of what has happened over the past 3 weeks, because the figures released on day 20 are staggering. According to combined Israeli and American assessments, more than 15,000 targets have been struck inside Iran since the opening of hostilities. The United States alone claims responsibility for over 7,000 of those strikes. Within that overall picture, approximately 70% of Iran's ballistic missile launchers have been neutralized. Roughly 80% of Iran's air defense systems have been attacked. Around 100 anti-aircraft batteries and 120 radars have been destroyed. Iran's missile production pace has dropped to zero. An estimated 2/3 of Iran's entire military-industrial complex has been destroyed. These are not press release numbers designed for public consumption. These are the kinds of figures that, if even partially accurate, represent the most comprehensive dismantling of a regional military power in modern history. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth declared on day 20 that it would be the most intensive day of the war so far and confirmed the 7,000 target figure personally. He added a pointed warning to Iranian leadership: holding a position in the basage or the Revolutionary Guards is now, in his words, a temporary job. General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, added something that should be read carefully: every day we are operating deep inside Iranian territory. That sentence is not a boast. It is a definition. It marks the transition from a campaign of precision strikes to something that now has the texture of sustained strategic degradation. If the Caspian Sea strike was the morning's most surprising development, the Strait of Hormuz is the week's most consequential story. The United States has deployed the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, approximately 2,200 combat-ready Marines, into the Persian Gulf aboard amphibious assault vessels. This force includes F-35B fighter jets, assault helicopters, and MV-22 Osprey aircraft. It is not a peacekeeping force. It is a rapid response amphibious assault capability, purpose-built for raids from sea and air, designed to give a president military options that simply didn't exist before its arrival. The scenarios being discussed in Washington and among military analysts are specific. The most prominent target under consideration is Kharg Island, through which approximately 90% of Iran's oil exports pass. Rather than destroying the infrastructure outright, which would send already rising oil prices into orbit, American experts are reportedly considering seizing the island and using it as a bargaining chip to force Iranian compliance on Hormuz. Other islands being evaluated include Keshem, Kish, and Hormuz, all of which contain missile infrastructure, attack boat facilities, warehouses, tunnels, and sites that could be converted into forward operating bases. Why is this suddenly urgent? Because Iran has stopped pretending the Strait of Hormuz is a temporary pressure point. Iranian officials are now speaking openly of a permanent new regime in the strait, one that involves charging fees and tolls, canceling free passage rights, and using the waterway as a perpetual lever of economic coercion against the West. This is the line that Washington cannot accept. The Strait of Hormuz handles approximately 20% of global oil trade. A permanent Iranian stranglehold on that waterway is not a regional problem. It is a global economic crisis that unfolds in slow motion until it becomes sudden. The American calculation appears to be straightforward. If Iran won't restore free navigation voluntarily, and if a ceasefire won't guarantee it either, then the United States will physically take the keys. The energy dimension of this conflict exploded onto the world stage in the past 48 hours in ways that will have consequences for months. Israel struck gas processing facilities at Asaluya and Salmas in southern Iran, major components of the country's petrochemical infrastructure. Supply pipelines, transport networks, and refining units were hit. Whether fully American approved or not, and the answer appears to be both yes in operational terms and we didn't know in public terms from the Trump administration, the strike was precise and devastating. Iran responded with missiles. Its target was Ras Laffan in Qatar, one of the most important natural gas processing facilities on Earth, and a critical piece of Qatar's economic identity. 5 missiles were launched. 4 were intercepted. 1 got through. Significant damage was caused. Fires broke out. The choice of Qatar was deliberate and, from a strategic standpoint, almost perverse. Qatar had not been a hostile actor toward Iran. Qatar had been, if anything, a quiet intermediary, maintaining channels of communication, refusing to fully align with the anti-Iran bloc, treading carefully. Iran attacked it anyway. The Saudi oil facility at Yanbu was also hit, causing a temporary halt in oil shipments. Drone strikes were recorded in the UAE and Kuwait targeting refinery operational units. Iran's message to the region was unmistakable. You let them hit our gas. We hit everyone's gas. From now on, this is a full economic war. The regional response was faster and sharper than anything we've seen since this conflict began. Saudi Arabia announced that the remnants of trust with Tehran have been completely destroyed. Qatar expelled Iranian military and security personnel, ordering them out within 24 hours. Foreign ministers from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Turkey, and 8 additional countries convened in Riyadh and issued a joint statement condemning Iran's attacks on oil facilities, desalination plants, airports, residential buildings, and embassies. That joint statement, 12 Arab and Muslim nations speaking with one voice, cited Article 51 of the UN Charter, affirmed their right to self-defense, demanded Iran stop the attacks immediately, called for a halt to interference in Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandeb, and requested an emergency session of the United Nations Security Council. The energy markets responded without hesitation. European gas prices jumped more than 30% in a single day. Oil prices surged, with some reports placing crude near $116 per barrel. These are numbers that ripple from filling stations in Manchester to household budgets in Mumbai. This war stopped being a regional conflict some time ago. It is now a global economic event dressed in military clothing. Here is an uncomfortable truth that needs to be stated plainly. Europe has failed this moment. NATO allies have not joined the coalition. European nations have issued carefully worded condemnations of both Israel's strikes on Iranian gas infrastructure and Iran's strikes on Gulf facilities, language so balanced it essentially says nothing. France and Italy have reportedly been paying Iran for safe passage guarantees for ships carrying their flags through Hormuz. This is, to call it by its proper name, the paying of tribute to a terrorist state. This behavior has historical precedents, and none of them are flattering. During the Western campaigns in Afghanistan and Iraq, some coalition forces paid Taliban and insurgent groups to avoid attacking their soldiers. At the time, it was defended as pragmatism. In hindsight, it was a signal of weakness that emboldened exactly the behavior it sought to buy off. The Europeans have watched Iran attack Gulf states repeatedly for 20 days. They have watched Iran threaten free navigation in the world's most important shipping lane. They have watched Iran fire missiles at civilian infrastructure across multiple sovereign nations. And their response has been to issue statements and pay fees. President Trump has publicly and repeatedly called for a formal coalition, a unified front similar to those assembled in previous Gulf conflicts. European leaders have declined, citing legal ambiguities, domestic political concerns, and an assortment of procedural objections that collectively add up to a decision not to act. The analysis here is not complicated. When democracies fail to confront authoritarian aggression at the moment of maximum opportunity, when the aggressor is already weakened, already under pressure, already losing, they don't preserve peace. They preserve the problem for a future generation to face at greater cost. The war is not only happening in the skies above Iran. It is happening in its streets, in its fuel lines, and in its leadership councils. The Basij, Iran's internal repression force, is under direct and sustained attack. Israel is systematically targeting checkpoints, command posts, and personnel. An Israeli strike eliminated a Basij operative at a guard post in western Iran. More than 10 Basij positions across the country were struck in a single operational sequence. An Iranian Mi-17 helicopter was destroyed at Sanandaj Airport. This targeting is not random. It reflects a clear strategic logic. The regime's ability to survive is not only dependent on its military capacity to repel external strikes. It depends equally on its ability to control its own population, destroy the repression apparatus, and the internal pressure that has been building for years through economic suffering, international isolation, and accumulated resentment, has nowhere left to go but outward. The signs of internal fracture are becoming harder to ignore. Fuel rations in Tehran have been cut from 30 liters per day to 20 liters, following strikes on fuel depots in Tehran and Alborz. A black market has emerged almost overnight, with reports of 10 liters of gasoline selling for approximately 2 million toman on the street. Businesses are closing early. Police officers have reportedly been seen hiding inside civilian areas rather than maintaining visible posts. And then there is the footage, unverified, but consistent with the overall atmosphere, of armed men firing from vehicles at Basij positions, circulating on opposition-linked social media. Whether authentic or not, the very fact that such imagery is circulating and being believed says something important about where Iranian public sentiment currently sits. The regime is responding by distributing weapons to volunteers and loyalist activists, setting up temporary headquarters and increasing checkpoints and tunnels, under bridges and on major roads. These are not the actions of a government that feels secure. These are the actions of a government preparing for the possibility that its own cities become battlegrounds. One of the most revealing developments of Day 20 came from inside Iran's leadership structure. Reports, not yet fully confirmed, indicate that Hussein Dagan, the former defense minister and a hardline figure from within the Revolutionary Guards, has been appointed to replace Ali Larijani as Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council. If accurate, this appointment tells us something crucial about the direction Iran's leadership intends to take. When a system comes under existential pressure, there are two possible responses: accommodation or entrenchment. The appointment of a security hardliner from the IRGC rather than a political figure with diplomatic instincts suggests that the regime is choosing entrenchment. The chaos at the top is not producing flexibility. It is producing hardening. This matters enormously for any scenario involving ceasefire negotiations or off-ramps. A regime that responds to military devastation by putting more Arab Sea officers in charge of its Security Council is a regime signaling that it intends to fight through to the end, whatever that end looks like. One scenario that has entered analytical conversations carefully, cautiously, but unmistakably involves Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and nuclear weapons. The logic runs like this. If Saudi Arabia enters this conflict at full force, it may activate its long-standing defense relationship with Pakistan and seek to shelter under Pakistan's nuclear umbrella. This is not an operational event. No Pakistani nuclear weapons are moving. No formal requests have been made public. But the fact that this scenario is now appearing in serious analytical discussions, rather than being dismissed as fringe speculation, indicates how dramatically the escalation ladder in this region has changed. The Middle East has spent decades with one nuclear power, Israel. The entry of Pakistan's nuclear capability into the regional equation, even as a theoretical deterrent, would represent a structural change in the region's strategic architecture that would outlast whatever settlement eventually ends this particular conflict. This war has confirmed several things about modern warfare that were previously theoretical. AI-directed swarm drones have been deployed against base-age roadblocks in Iranian cities. We are talking about swarms of up to 200 drones communicating with each other, with AI software identifying targets, processing approval chains, and coordinating strikes in seconds. This technology was first tested in Ukraine. It is now operating inside the borders of Iran. The Leonidas Directed Energy System, an American electronic warfare platform, has been deployed, using targeted electromagnetic pulses to destroy the guidance systems on incoming drones and missiles without firing a single conventional projectile. It identifies targets and fries electronics across multiple airborne threats simultaneously. Israel's laser interception system has been adapted for airborne deployment, a pod attached to aircraft that can intercept drones and small projectiles in flight. This is a capability that changes the economics of air defense entirely, since laser shots cost a fraction of interceptor missiles. The American war machine has not just won this war tactically. It has demonstrated, in live conditions against some of the most sophisticated Russian-supplied defensive systems in the world, the S-300, S-400 Chinese radar networks, that its technological superiority is not theoretical. It is operational, proven, and decisive. Connect all of these threads and a single picture emerges. Iran entered this conflict as a regional power with significant deterrence capability, a global proxy network, and the geographic leverage of the Strait of Hormuz. 20 days later, 2/3 of its military industry has been destroyed. Its air defenses are largely gone. Its missile production has stopped. Its northern supply corridor has been interdicted. Its repression forces are being systematically eliminated. Its regional neighbors, even those it once cultivated as semi-allies, have united against it. Its streets are restless. Its fuel is rationed. And 2,200 American Marines are sailing toward its coast. The regime's response has been to appoint harder men to leadership positions and to threaten every Gulf state simultaneously. This is the behavior of a power that has run out of good options and is now choosing the option of maximum defiance. Whether that defiance translates into a dramatic last move, a serious attempt to close Hormuz, a missile strike that crosses a threshold that forces American ground action, an internal collapse that nobody predicted, is the question that Day 21 will begin to answer. What is already clear is this: the Middle East that existed before this war will not exist after it. The alliances, the deterrence equations, the assumptions about safe depths and protected supply routes, and the limits of Western military reach, all of it has been rewritten in 20 days. The next question, as the Marines close in on Hormuz, is who gets to write what comes next.